Studios like to remind their stars that they're not made of money, but that hasn't stopped some actors from asking for more anyway, which doesn't always work out. Here's who asked for a bigger slice and who lost the whole pie because of it. Henry Cavill made a name for himself as Superman when he took to the skies in 2013's Man of Steel, rising to superstardom faster than a speeding bullet. Cavill quickly found himself one of Hollywood's most in-demand action stars, which led to his casting in the title role of the Netflix fantasy epic The Witcher. As a fan of the books that the series is based on, Cavill threw himself into the role, and it became an instant hit for the streamer. But this perfect situation didn't last forever. Perhaps feeling the power of his newfound A-list status, Cavill reportedly butted heads with producers and writers over the direction of the series and the portrayal of his character in particular. Whether it was demanding script changes or just being heavy-handed around the set, Cavill found himself an enemy on his own show, and by all accounts, it was the actor's demanding nature that, rightly or wrongly, led to his ultimate dismissal. It didn't take long for Netflix to announce that Liam Hemsworth would step into the role for the 4th season.
But I said, let me watch the TV show and have a look at the books and really get stuck into it.
At the time, many speculated that Cavill was leaving the series to focus on playing Superman again. But despite his highly touted return as Kal-El in 2022's Black Adam, it was announced shortly after that film left theaters that his version of Superman was being put out to pasture as well. Fair or not, William Shatner has long had a reputation as someone who isn't easy to work with. He's feuded with his Star Trek co-stars on multiple occasions, including Leonard Nimoy and George Takei, the latter of whom called Shatner a prima donna in a 2022 interview with The Guardian.
Oh my.
But it isn't just his relationships with his fellow actors that have earned Shatner this prickly reputation. He's also repeatedly missed out on opportunities to return as Captain Kirk because his pay demands were too much. Ironically enough, Shatner's insistence on bigger paydays paved the way for the existence of Star Trek The Next Generation. In 1986, he demanded a hefty raise to return as Kirk for Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. And after that film's overwhelming success, Paramount wanted a new series on the small screen. But the studio was also concerned about having to lay out big dollars for Shatner, as well as the rest of the original crew. So the decision was made to bring in an entirely new cast who wouldn't have such lofty demands. It's especially ironic, of course, because in the early days of TNG, Shatner felt nothing but skepticism and resentment over being replaced by Patrick Stewart as captain of the Enterprise. Of course, he would eventually team up with his replacement for 1994's Star Trek Generations. The subject of gender pay parity, or lack thereof, has been a controversial topic in Hollywood for years. It became a hot-button issue again in 2022 when Neve Campbell announced a departure from the Scream franchise over a salary dispute. After it was reported that she wouldn't return for the 6th film, she released a statement in which she explained that she wanted a higher salary than the studio was willing to pay. She also made sure to note that the dispute was less about greed and more about fairness. As she put it, "As a woman, I have had to work extremely hard in my career to establish my value, especially when it comes to Scream. I felt the offer that was presented to me did not equate to the value I've brought to the franchise." But that wasn't the end of this particular saga. Just 2 years later, it was announced that Campbell would be returning for Scream 7. Kevin Williamson, who wrote the first Scream and is set to direct Scream 7, have been her biggest supporter, declaring that she did indeed deserve what she'd asked for.
What can you tell us about Scream 7?
I can't tell you anything.
No. My lips are sealed.
Clearly, Campbell and the studio finally found common ground. The absence of Neve Campbell from Scream 6 was a big deal at the time, considering she was an integral part of the franchise up until that point. But then she was lured back with a better deal for Scream 7, and unfortunately, that happened at the expense of one of the series' newer stars, Jenna Ortega. Ortega appeared in 2022's Scream, and then returned a year later for Scream 6. But just as soon as Campbell's return was announced, it was also revealed that Ortega wouldn't be returning for the 7th installment, as she too wanted a bigger deal than she'd been offered. A piece in The Hollywood Reporter revealed that Ortega parted ways with the project after demanding a sizable pay increase. She reportedly felt that with her newfound A-list status, she should no longer be paid like the up-and-comer that she was when she was first cast. There is logic to Ortega's thinking. Just a few years earlier, she was an emerging child star, but now she was an in-demand leading lady, having headlined both the smash hit Netflix series Wednesday and 2024's Beetlejuice. The studio just wasn't willing to pony up the extra cash, or at least that was the official story, until an April 2025 interview with The Cut, in which Ortega revealed the real reason she left: the departure of her co-star, Melissa Barrera, had been dismissed from the franchise in the wake of her comments supporting Palestine freedom, along with the directing team for the last 2 Scream installments. As she put it, it had nothing to do with pay or scheduling. Much has been made over the years about the feud between Will Smith and his Fresh Prince of Bel-Air co-star Janet Hubert, who played the original Aunt Viv. Trouble behind the scenes was, for many years, believed to be the reason Hubert was booted from the show and replaced by Daphne Maxwell Reid. But while the friction between Smith and Hubert may have indeed been a factor, it was her demand for a pay rise that apparently played a bigger role, though that revelation didn't come to light until decades later. During Max's 2020 Fresh Prince reunion special, Hubert revealed, "They offered me this really bad deal in the third season. They said, you've got 2 months and 2 weeks of work, and you cannot work anywhere else."
So that meant my salary was cut. I had a new baby and a husband who was out of work.
Ultimately, Hubert declined what she deemed to be an unacceptable offer. Despite the common misconception, she was never actually fired. Nevertheless, the result was that Hubert found herself all but blacklisted in Hollywood because of an unfair reputation for ruffling feathers behind the scenes. In 2008, the Marvel Cinematic Universe began with the release of 2 movies, Iron Man in May and The Incredible Hulk in June. At the time, embattled actor Robert Downey Jr. was a risky choice to lead the former, while Oscar-nominated Edward Norton looked like a sure bet to help the latter be a monster hit. But it would be Downey who become the MCU's reliable leading man, whereas Norton's many demands led him to ultimately lose the role of Bruce Banner. The trouble started during production on The Incredible Hulk, when Norton insisted on contributing to the script and found himself in conflict with a studio that had a very different vision than he had. So when it came time to make 2012's The Avengers, the studio was understandably nervous about Norton's preferences interfering with the demands of an even more massive production. Mark Ruffalo ended up taking over the role for all of Banner's subsequent appearances in the MCU. Over the years, as more information about the studio's falling out with Norton came to light, it became clear that the actor simply wanted more than he could get. Marvel architect Kevin Feige explained in a statement, "Our decision is definitely not one based on monetary factors, but instead rooted in the need for an actor who embodies the creativity and collaborative spirit of our other talented cast members." A character actor whose career mostly consisted of playing various tough guys on the big and small screens, Richard Castellano became a bit of an icon after playing Clemenza, a quasi-mentor to Michael Corleone in 1972's The Godfather. With an important role in a critically acclaimed award-winning smash hit, you might think that Castellano would have hit it big soon afterwards, but instead he mostly faded back into obscurity. Part of that might be his own fault, as he lost the opportunity to star in a sequel after negotiations broke down. For years, it was assumed that Castellano walked away over a salary dispute, but in a 1981 interview with the New York Post, the actor denied that version of events. Instead, he claimed that after an unpleasant experience with director Francis Ford Coppola on the first Godfather, he was annoyed by the physical expectations for his character in the sequel. He recounted, "The demands on me were impossible. I had settled on a price and everybody else's was settled upon mine. Coppola had me losing weight to play Clemenza as a young man. I was down to 194 pounds. When I received the script 5 minutes later, it had me rolling in at 300 pounds. Coppola, for his part, has more recently claimed that Castellano balked at the script and wanted control of his own dialogue. Whatever the reality, it's pretty clear that Castellano wanted something that Coppola wasn't willing to provide, fair or otherwise.
Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.
In the late 2000s, there was no hotter show on TV than Lost, airing on ABC from 2004 to 2010. It told the saga of a group of airplane crash survivors attempting to figure out the truth of the strange island they find themselves stranded on. A key part of what made the series so engrossing was its strong ensemble cast. Over the course of the show's run, actors came and went, leaving the island by death or some other twist of fate. One of the first major cast changes was the departure of Harold Perrineau, who played Michael, the estranged father of 10-year-old Walt. But it wasn't just a creative decision that led to Perrineau's exit, nor was it more money that the actor was after. On the contrary, Perrineau simply wanted more to do on screen. He had joined the show with the promise of equal parts for the whole cast, but he quickly noticed that it was only really focusing on the white main characters, while the other castaways were often sidelined, and he made his displeasure known. While talking with TV critic Maureen Ryan for her book Burn It Down, Power, Complicity, and a Call for Change in Hollywood, he recalled telling the showrunners, "I don't have to be the first, I don't have to have the most episodes, but I'd like to be in the mix." Alas, despite the initial promise, the producers didn't have an expanded part in mind for Perrineau. So rather than deal with an unhappy star, Michael was gradually phased out of the story. Easily one of the biggest sitcoms of all time, Friends made stars out of every one of its main cast members, as well as some of its recurring favorites. One actor who never got that boost, though, was Anita Barone. Her stint on Friends lasted just 1 episode, even though her character didn't disappear. In the beginning of the series, Barone played Ross's ex-wife, Carol Willick, who left him after coming out as a lesbian.
So what's new? Still,
A lesbian?
Well... You never know.
In the second episode, Carol turns up to tell Ross that she's pregnant with his child. Behind the scenes, though, Barone was reportedly unhappy that her character wasn't going to appear very often. She was angling for a more full-time role, but the part just wasn't big enough to satisfy that desire. So she exited the series after that single appearance. Eventually, when Carol returned, she was played by Jane Sebert, who continued in the role for a total of 15 episodes across the course of the series. If Barone had any idea at the time of just how big Friends would become, she might have stuck it out. Still, she did pretty well for herself, securing bigger roles on series like The Jeff Foxworthy Show, The War at Home, and Shake It Up. 2013 saw the debut of the family drama The Fosters, which ran for a total of 5 seasons until 2018. Praised for its depiction of LGBTQ issues, the series centered around a pair of lesbian parents who raise a family of adopted teens. The show's biggest strength was its young ensemble cast, which included Jake T. Austin, although he wouldn't remain on the show forever. For the first 2 seasons, Austin played Jesus Foster, the adopted son of Steph and Lena, but by the 3rd season, he'd been replaced by Noah Centineo. So what happened? In January 2017, Austin settled speculation on social media surrounding his departure, making it clear that it wasn't about money but a desire to do more with the character. As he explained in a series of tweets, he was informed that Jesus would have a much smaller role in the 3rd season. He asked for more screen time, but the show didn't budge, and he was out completely. As he put it, "I was only asked to return for 3 episodes and wasn't going to be able to work on anything else, so I left." In an ironic twist of fate, the version of Jesus that was now played by Centineo wound up appearing in more than half of Season 3's 20 installments, and a total of 53 episodes over the remaining 3 seasons. It may be surprising to learn that Pierce Brosnan refused to play James Bond, considering that he eventually did take on the role of the iconic spy for 4 films in the late 90s and early 2000s. But what's perhaps even more surprising is that Brosnan was almost the face of the gritty 2006 series reboot Casino Royale, before Daniel Craig was selected to take over the part. Even after Craig stepped in, Royale retained many connections to the Brosnan era, including Judi Dench reprising her role as M, and director Martin Campbell returning to the franchise after helming 1995's GoldenEye. But Brosnan's absence made it clear that it was a bracingly new direction for 007. Had it not been for Brosnan's hefty salary demand, he could have been behind the wheel of the Aston Martin one more time.
Now, you said something about going down together?
Fans might be inclined to criticize the studio for not meeting the star's asking price, considering how beloved Brosnan was in the role. But he was asking for a lot of money. It was reported in 2005 that he demanded a staggering $45 million to come back. In the end, though, the recasting decision was probably the right choice. Craig went on to become a new fan favorite, starring in 5 Bond flicks before bowing out after No Time to Die in 2021. Despite returning again and again to the Terminator franchise, Arnold Schwarzenegger isn't really known for doing sequels, even though his movies do often have follow-ups. So when the 1987 sci-fi action classic Predator released its first sequel in 1990, it wasn't all that surprising to see that Schwarzenegger had been replaced. This time it was Danny Glover in the lead role, facing off against a titular warrior alien. It came to light years later, though, that Schwarzenegger was actually slated to star in Predator 2, before contract talks stalled over his salary demands. During an interview with Collider in 2011, producer John Davis explained that the studio was very close to once again securing the services of Schwarzenegger. Ultimately, the difference came down to what might sound like a modest sum in terms of movie contracts. Davis revealed the deal broke down over $250,000, and so Schwarzenegger was swapped out for Glover, and the setting of the film shifted from the jungle to the urban chaos of Los Angeles. And while many fans might argue that the sequel is a worthy successor, few would disagree that having Schwarzenegger return to face off with another alien hunter would have likely made it better than it was. Of course, it's also worth noting that the film Schwarzenegger made instead of Predator 2 was 1990's Total Recall, so perhaps it all worked out for the best in the end.
A man is defined by his action, not his memory.
Heavy metal rock star Rob Zombie spread his wings in 2003 with the release of his directorial debut film, House of 1000 Corpses. The low-budget horror splatterfest starred his wife Sherry Moon, a pre-Office Rainn Wilson, a pre-Justified Walton Goggins, and Karen Black. The film became a cult favorite and received a sequel 2 years later, The Devil's Rejects, with much of the main cast returning. But Black, who played the twisted killer known as Mother Firefly, wasn't among them. In an interview with Zeta Minor, Zombie explained that he wanted Black to return, but tough negotiations got in the way. He said, "I always thought Karen was going to do it. I didn't replace her on purpose. As we came down to the wire and people were signing their deals and all the final things were being done, Karen just had a problem with something and we tried to resolve it and couldn't, and I had to move on." Leslie Easterbrook took over the role for the sequel, which didn't seem to make too much of a difference to audiences, as The Devil's Rejects earned even better reviews than its predecessor. As for Black, who died in 2013, it doesn't sound like the falling out resulted in any lingering animosity between her and Zombie. Just before her passing, he sent her a message of support for her struggle with cancer and even asked fans to donate to her GoFundMe campaign. 1975's Rocky Horror Picture Show is an iconic cult classic that has endured for decades on the midnight movie circuit. But when it first came out, it was actually a box office bomb, although it still somehow managed to get a sequel.
I'd like to tell you about a new film from the gang that gave you the Rocky Horror Show. Shock Treatment.
Well, much less widely known, 1981's Shock Treatment brought back many of the characters from the original. But out of all the actors in the main cast, the only one to return was Richard O'Brien, who was also the film's co-writer and the creator of the original stage play. As for Barry Bostwick and Susan Sarandon, who played young newlyweds Brad and Janet in the original, they were both replaced, all because Sarandon wanted more money. Bostwick made this surprising revelation during an interview with Orlando Weekly in 2022. As he explained, "I was never asked because they asked Susan first, and she apparently wanted too much money." According to Bostwick, the filmmakers weren't interested in having him back if Sarandon wasn't going to be there as well. He speculated, "I think they felt that if they're going to get a new Janet, they have to get a new Brad. It would just look like a marriage gone bad." Ultimately, Shock Treatment was an even bigger flop than Rocky Horror, both in its original release and in the decades since. One of the most legendary action stars in Hollywood history, Sylvester Stallone, has several iconic characters to his name, from John Rambo to Rocky Balboa. And once upon a time, he nearly added another classic to his resume. He almost played Axel Foley in Beverly Hills Cop. That 1984 film would instead launch Eddie Murphy into the stratosphere, but it was originally developed with Stallone in mind. He even worked alongside producers to craft the project, but in the process, he made demands that the studio simply wasn't willing to meet. Chief among Stallone's requests was changing the film from a comedy to a no-holds-barred action flick. According to director Martin Brest, the actor actually crafted a script of his own, having previously penned multiple Rocky and Rambo entries. But as Brest told Variety in 2023, that's not what the studio really was looking to do.
And so Paramount says, "All right, we can't afford to make this. You go tell Sly to cut it back." And I said, "He's the biggest star in the world. I'm not going to tell him to cut it back."
But that wasn't the end of Stallone's involvement with the story, or at least his version of the project. He took his script, changed the names, and molded it into a separate action movie. According to Brest, he went off and he took that script and it became Cobra. So we wound up getting Eddie Murphy a few weeks before shooting, and we restructured the whole story in a couple of weeks and went into production with basically an outline, writing as we went. Plenty of actors have played Superman on both the big and small screens, although the character known as Superboy hasn't quite enjoyed the same star treatment. But in the span of just a few years, not one, but two different actors took on the mantle of Superboy in the eponymously titled TV series that ran for 4 seasons between 1988 and 1992. The show chronicled Clark Kent's days as a teenager, although the character was already really more of a man than a boy. Gerald Christopher played the title role beginning in the 2nd season, but it was John Haymes Newton who originated the part in season 1, until he lost his job because he wanted more money. In an interview with Superman homepage in 2002, Newton reflected on his brief time in the tights, explaining that his departure wasn't exactly a firing. As he put it, "It was my choice to leave. The producers asked me back repeatedly. I asked for a small raise, 20%, due to the amount of dangerous stunts I was performing. The raise offer was retracted because they claimed an illegally issued traffic citation I received while on private property made the character look bad." Newton also acknowledged that the way he went about negotiating didn't do him any favors though. He admitted, "To make a long story short, if I could, I would go back and do things differently." It's not just live-action roles that can be replaced when someone gets greedy. It can also happen to voice actors, although it's typically far less publicized. Just such a scenario played out on, of all places, the children's classic Thomas and Friends, the series set on the fictional island of Sodor that revolves around the iconic locomotive Thomas the Tank Engine. Voice actor Martin T. Sherman played multiple characters on the American version of the show for several years, including Thomas himself. In the end, it wasn't exactly greed that put Sherman out of work, but instead a desire to be paid fairly.
Whatever's the matter, Thomas?
As Sherman explained in an open letter posted on a fan site in 2014, for the last 5 years, it has been my great honor and pleasure to create the American voices of Thomas the Tank Engine and Percy. Unfortunately, I must now quit the show. It is embarrassing, but the reason is that they are paying a very low wage. The terms they are offering are so poor, and this with the immense success of Thomas that the only right thing for me to do is walk away.
When fans first saw 1982's Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, they were likely confused for a couple of minutes. Instead of Captain Kirk, played by William Shatner, at the helm, the film opens with a young Starfleet officer, Saavik, commanding the crew of the Enterprise. This eventually proves to be a simulation, and we learn Saavik, a Vulcan played by Kirstie Alley in one of her first roles, is a trainee. But she leaves a deep impression in that first scene and throughout the rest of the film. Saavik appears twice more in the film series, but without Alley. In 1984's Star Trek III: The Search for Spock and 1986's Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, it's Robin Curtis who steps into the role, and then the character disappears forever. So what happened to the original Saavik? According to Alley in her 2016 interview with StarTrek.com, it wasn't so much that she asked for more, but that she was offered less. Alley said, "That never made sense to me, like you're not paying as much as the first one and it's a bigger role?" She added that in spite of her asking, quote, sort of gently, the reason for the lowball, she never got an answer and was replaced without explanation. Tank, played by Marcus Chong, is one of the few members of the Nebuchadnezzar's crew to survive the events of 1999's The Matrix. But unlike the other three survivors, Tank doesn't show up in either of the sequels, and the story of why swerves into bizarre territory. The writer-director team of the Wachowskis wanted Chong to reprise the role of Tank, and sources differ on what he was offered. In Chong's own 45-minute YouTube documentary, The Marcus Chong Story, he says the Wachowskis offered him $250,000 to appear in 2003's The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions. Other sources put the figure at $400,000. Regardless, neither amount was enough for Chong, who wanted $1 million. When the Wachowskis said no, Chong resorted to a strange negotiation strategy. Chong had a lawyer send a letter to the Wachowskis in which he asked either for $500,000 or he would do the work for free. Apparently, the Wachowskis had enough because they chose option 3 and had Tank killed off screen between movies. In the aftermath, Chong unsuccessfully sued the Wachowskis, their production company Eon, Warner Brothers, and AOL Time Warner. He was also arrested for allegedly making threatening phone calls to the filmmakers. After the Red Skull surprised everyone by appearing on the distant planet Vormir in 2018's Avengers: Infinity War, it may have also surprised a lot of fans that it was not Hugo Weaving playing the Spectral Guide. Though he originated the role in 2011's Captain America: The First Avenger, Ross Marquand of The Walking Dead fame had taken over. As early as a year after The First Avenger was released in theaters, Weaving told Collider he had no interest in reprising the role, saying, "I think I've done my dash with that sort of film. It was good to do it and try it out, but to be honest, it's not the sort of film I seek out and really am excited by." Acknowledging he signed a multi-picture deal, Weaving insisted he didn't think Marvel would try to force the matter if he said no. It turns out, however, that Weaving was willing to reprise the role of Red Skull for Infinity War and its 2019 follow-up, Avengers: Endgame. However, it wound up being Marvel Studios who tried to change the terms of the actor's multi-picture deal. In 2020, he told Time Out that Marvel lowballed him in their renegotiations. While Weaving didn't give precise figures, he said Marvel offered him much less for the two films. The late Valerie Harper was a successful sitcom star throughout the 70s. She rose to fame on The Mary Tyler Moore Show, eventually earning her own spin-off series, Rhoda. She led her own series again in the 80s, NBC's Valerie, in which she played a mother trying to raise 3 sons mostly on her own with her husband Michael, an airline pilot who's often away for work. Coincidentally, the series also proved an early high point in the career of a young Jason Bateman, who played Valerie's eldest son David. Valerie proved a hit, and in Season 2, Harper decided to take advantage of the situation. Originally received receiving $56,750 per episode, according to People, along with 10% of the show's adjusted gross profits. Harper asked for a significant bump to $100,000 per episode and 35% of the adjusted gross profits. When NBC said no, Harper stopped showing up for work. NBC came back with a counter, $65,000 per episode and 12.5%. Even still, they apparently didn't plan to pay her that for very long because she was fired after filming only one more episode. Her character was killed off, and the show was first renamed Valerie's Family and eventually the Hogan Family. In July 2012, Jennifer Lopez told the world she was leaving her position as judge on American Idol. She broke the news on Ryan Seacrest's radio show On the Air just a day after Aerosmith frontman Steven Tyler announced his own exit from the show. At the time, J-Lo told Seacrest she was leaving because Idol was monopolizing her time, explaining, "I honestly feel like the time has come that I have to get back to doing the other things that I have to do."
It's been a joy for me to sit here and watch this for so many years. Thank you.
But it wasn't long before word of a different reason for Lopez's departure emerged. According to The Wrap, Lopez wasn't leaving to devote more time to other pursuits. She was fired. The site claimed that the performer, who was reportedly earning $15 million as an American Idol judge, felt she was underpaid and wanted $17 million. According to The Wrap's source, Lopez was let go after asking, with Fox looking to rework the show because of a steep decline in ratings. Of course, between her musical career, her acting, and more, it's doubtful J-Lo felt much financial hardship in the interim, but even if she had, it wouldn't matter much. She was rehired the following year and remained as a judge until the end of the series' time on Fox. There remains no official word on exactly why Jaimee Foxworth's Family Matters character disappeared in the show's 4th season, beyond co-creator William Bickley saying it was for, quote, budget considerations. After Mama's Wedding, Foxworth's character Judy was never seen again. Rather than recast Judy for the show's 5 remaining seasons, her existence was utterly forgotten. One persistent rumor puts the blame for her departure on the doorstep of Foxworth's mother. According to an alleged BET article, Gwen Fox, Foxworth's mother and manager, demanded more money for her daughter, and instead, Foxworth's contract wasn't renewed. This has never been confirmed, however, it could easily be what Bickley was talking about when he mentioned budget considerations. Foxworth wouldn't work as an actor on television again, and in later years confessed to difficult struggles, including walking a difficult road to sobriety. By 1982, the action comedy The Dukes of Hazzard wasn't only one of the most watched shows on television, it was also a huge source of ancillary revenue for producers and CBS. According to the New York Times, it generated around $125 million in annual sales of t-shirts, toys, and lunchboxes, as well as all the money in from premium advertising rates. The show's stars, actor John Schneider and Tom Wopat, thought they were largely responsible for the lucrative popularity of the show, and as such thought they should be more fairly compensated for their efforts. In 1982, the two stars threatened to leave the show, demanding that producer Warner Brothers give them a raise in their salaries and a piece of the merchandising profits. Warner Brothers, however, thought Schneider and Wopat were expendable. They let the actors leave the Dukes of Hazzard and then staged a big national search to find 2 new Dukes. After auditioning more than 2,000 actors, Warner picked Byron Cherry and Christopher Mayer to play Coy and Vance Duke, explaining that Bo and Luke had left home and joined NASCAR. Warner miscalculated the popularity of Schneider and Wopat. With Cherry and Mayer headlining, the Dukes of Hazzard fell from number 6 in the ratings to number 34 for the 1982-83 season. They had little choice but to lure back Schneider and Wopat with substantial pay raises. We know. Tobey Maguire was in Spider-Man 2 along with its follow-up Spider-Man 3, but before that could happen, the web shooter needed to be fired, rehired, and briefly threatened with being replaced by Jake Gyllenhaal. As recounted by Screen Crush, when Maguire learned how much Sony had made from 2002's Spider-Man, his $4 million payday seemed far too small a slice of the pie. So, during negotiations, Maguire did something many saw as a tactic. He didn't show up. He was supposed to report to get his face and body scanned for the visual effects of Spider-Man 2. However, Maguire said that due to mild discomfort in his lower back from an injury sustained while filming 2003's Seabiscuit, he wouldn't be able to show up for work.
My back! Oh, my back!
Rather than suffer what they saw as a bluff on Maguire's part, Sony fired him, and soon afterward, director Sam Raimi and some of the producers met with Jake Gyllenhaal about taking over the role. Maguire reportedly panicked, had his future father-in-law, Ron Meyer, then the vice chairman of NBC Universal, run interference for him and won the coveted rollback. Both a sequel and a prequel, The Godfather Part 2 switches between the continuing adventures of Michael Corleone and Vito Corleone, Robert De Niro playing the younger version of the character from The Godfather that won Marlon Brando an Oscar. Francis Ford Coppola, director and co-writer of both films, tried to get Brando to return to the franchise and reprise the role. According to the Daily Mail, in 1973, Coppola sent a letter to Brando to plead his case, writing, "Marlon, I respect you enormously, and if you told me that you did not want to do it, I would accept that and never mention it again." According to IndieWire, Brando was scheduled to film his cameo, but didn't show up on the shooting day because he was in the middle of a financial dispute with Paramount Pictures. Just weeks after his long-running hit sitcom The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air went off the air, Will Smith got his movie career off the ground. Starring as wisecracking, alien-killing fighter pilot Captain Stephen Hiller in Independence Day, his sci-fi action thriller became the highest-grossing movie of 1996. Smith zoomed onto the A-list of film stars, becoming one of the top-paid actors in Hollywood, headlining big moneymakers like Men in Black, Hancock, I Am Legend, and I, Robot. Afterward, Smith wasn't averse to appearing in sequels. He starred in 3 Bad Boys movies and 3 Men in Black films. Even still, when the long-awaited Independence Day follow-up, Independence Day Resurgence, finally hit theaters in 2016, Smith wasn't in the cast. His character, Captain Hiller, was said to have died off-screen sometime before the events of the film. According to The Independent, director Roland Emmerich started putting the sequel together in 2011, at which time Smith agreed to star in 2 continuations for a total of $50 million. That, Emmerich said, made the actor's services, quote, too expensive. In its first 20 years on the air, The Simpsons earned $1 billion in profits for Fox, according to Today. Its 6 main voice performers are paid relatively well for their role in the series, earning as much as $400,000 per episode, according to The Hollywood Reporter. Maggie Roswell served as a supporting member of The Simpsons voice cast, appearing frequently as auxiliary characters, notably holier-than-thou neighbor lady Maud Flanders. As of the 11th season of The Simpsons in 1999 to 2000, Roswell's appearances grew more infrequent until she disappeared entirely. It all ended with Maud Flanders' violent, shocking, and darkly comic death. She falls off a racetrack grandstand when hit by a projectile from a t-shirt cannon. According to the Los Angeles Times, Fox said Roswell left the show because she'd grown tired of commuting from her home in Denver to Simpsons production facilities in Southern California. Roswell disputed that, claiming she asked for a raise from her standard $1,500 to $2,000 per episode fee to $6,000. Fox offered an additional $150 per paycheck. So she quit, as that sum didn't even cover the cost of a plane ticket from Denver to LA. The late TV show creator Gary Marshall ended his career by directing a trio of ensemble romantic comedies with multiple intersecting plot lines that take place around holidays. Before Mother's Day and New Year's Eve, he kicked off the unofficial trilogy with Valentine's Day, starring a slew of big names. This included Julia Roberts, Anne Hathaway, Bradley Cooper, Jennifer Garner, Topher Grace, and Patrick Dempsey. Not among the cast? Dempsey's Grey's Anatomy co-star Katherine Heigl. In May 2009, Page Six reported that Heigl was slated to appear in Valentine's Day, but during salary negotiations, she and her team asked for a $3 million fee. An insider on the movie said that such a figure was ridiculous. They claimed that every performer on the project would be filming for no more than 2 weeks and that no other actors asked for nearly that amount. Ultimately, producers went in a non-Heigl direction. As one of the top-grossing stars in the world, and for more than 30 years at that, Tom Cruise is generally a go-to guy for a Hollywood movie studio. This is especially true if they want to spend a ton of money on a big-budget, stunts and effects-heavy action movie. In 2008, on the heels of a third Mission Impossible entry and a remake of War of the Worlds, Cruise was circling his next project, a high-octane spy thriller for Columbia Pictures called Edwin A. Salt. According to Variety, Cruise was willing to portray the title character, a CIA operative accused of being an enemy sleeper agent who must evade pursuant authorities and clear his name. However, he wanted a sizable fee for his acting services, a whopping $20 million. Columbia's parent company, Sony, balked at the price tag and backed away from Cruise. The studio ultimately hired Angelina Jolie and reworked Edwin A. Salt into Salt, a film which earned nearly $300 million at the global box office. Oddly enough, according to the New York Post, Jolie earned for Salt exactly what Cruise had asked for, $20 million. One of CBS's most recognizable and enduring brands, the tropical set crime procedural Hawaii Five-0, originally ran from 1968 to 1980. Afterward, a reboot returned to typically high ratings from 2010 to 2020. Similar to CBS's many other crime shows, the new Five-0 was an ensemble series about a tight-knit law enforcement team, two of which were actors Daniel Day Kim and Grace Park. With production about to start on Season 8 in 2017, Kim and Park entered contract renewal negotiations, teaming up in hopes of getting a better deal. According to The Hollywood Reporter, Kim and Park asked for raises that would bring them to a salary at or very close to those of other cast members. However, CBS refused to give the actors what they wanted, so they quit the show. A CBS insider assured THR that race wasn't a factor in paying Kim and Park less, but the actors weren't so sure. Kim wrote on Facebook, "I encourage us all to look beyond the disappointment of this moment to the bigger picture." Park was a bit more diplomatic, telling EW that there were a number of factors that contributed to her exit, but that she ultimately walked away because it was best for her integrity. After quietly premiering in 2000, CSI would become one of the most popular and most imitated shows on television. The ensemble crime procedural about forensic investigators in Las Vegas was the second most watched drama on TV by the end of the 2003-2004 TV season. Shortly after, original cast members George Eads and Jorja Fox found themselves fired from the franchise-launching series. According to People, Fox and Eads were under contract with CBS, and the network wished to extend, offering a raise of $20,000 per episode each. When Fox and Eads didn't show up to shoot a CSI episode in July 2004, network executives took that as a sign of silent protest that the pay bump was insufficient. CBS's response to the no-shows was firing Eads and Fox, but they rehired them 2 weeks later at their old salaries, canceling the $20,000 per episode raises. In the first decade of the 2000s, few people were as famous or omnipresent as Paris Hilton. Part of the mega-wealthy Hilton family, she became famous for being a conventionally attractive, club-hopping scenester who parlayed her visibility into a hit Fox reality show, The Simple Life. Hilton also made a sex tape that was leaked online. Establishing a persona as a disaffected prima donna, Hilton even filed a trademark for her oft-muttered catchphrase.
"That's hot."
Hilton was just about at the peak of her fame and influence in 2009 when she secured a small role in The Other Guys, a police comedy starring Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg. An insider on the movie told Page Six that while Hilton's part amounted to a cameo, the celebrity's representatives delivered a hefty list of requirements for their client. Among Hilton's needs for her one-day shoot were live lobsters to be cooked at a moment's notice and top-shelf Grey Goose vodka. The director ultimately cut Hilton's appearance from the theatrical cut of The Other Guys entirely.
For 3 years, the teen comedy Lizzie McGuire ruled the Disney Channel roost with Hilary Duff in the titular role. Unfortunately, the success of 2003's The Lizzie McGuire Movie marked the beginning of the end for the fictional teen sweetheart. That same year, Entertainment Weekly spoke to Susan Duff, Hilary Duff's mother and manager. She said that Disney ended negotiations for a film sequel when she asked for a promised bonus to be paid immediately. She also told EW that Disney was trying to shortchange her daughter to continue on the Lizzie McGuire series. Apparently, they offered only $35,000 per episode, even though they knew she was being offered six figures by outside parties. In the end, it seems that Disney couldn't give her what she wanted, as both the TV series and the plans for a movie sequel ended.
That's okay. I don't want it.
In 2019, news broke that a revival series was being planned for Disney+, with Duff back in McGuire's shoes. But by the end of 2020, Duff told fans on her Instagram that the planned series wouldn't happen. In 1985's Back to the Future, Crispin Glover played Marty McFly's dad, George McFly. However, the star was not only absent for 1989's Back to the Future Part 2 and its sequel, except for shots recycled from the first film, but his disappearance indirectly led to a lawsuit. Glover was apparently unhappy with the script for Back to the Future 2 and demanded the same salary as lead Michael J. Fox, $1 million, to return. In 2012, Glover told the AV Club that this was a lie and that he was offered $150,000 for the sequel. He claimed that it was around half the amount offered to Leah Thompson and Tom Wilson, who had similar-sized roles. He also said that when he tried to negotiate, the offer was actually decreased by $25,000. The following year on Opie and Anthony, Glover said he did express issues with the script and implied that the studio's supposedly low offer was punishment for his questions. With Glover out, Jeffrey Weissman stepped into the role and he was outfitted with a mold made from Glover's face. The mold turned out to be much more expensive than the filmmakers expected. In 1990, Glover sued the producers of Back to the Future Part 2 for using his likeness without permission. The producers settled for a reported $760,000. In 1988's Die Hard and its 1990 sequel, Bruce Willis's John McClane takes out the bad guys pretty much on his own. But in 1995's Die Hard with a Vengeance, he gets a sidekick in the form of electrician Zeus Carver. In a 2020 episode of the Rewatchables podcast, Quentin Tarantino said the part of Carver was written specifically with Laurence Fishburne in mind. He added that Fishburne, believing he had the producers over the proverbial barrel, demanded a $1 million payday. But then came the 1994 Cannes Film Festival, where one of the producers was impressed with Samuel L. Jackson's performance in Pulp Fiction. As anyone who's seen Die Hard with a Vengeance knows, Jackson took the part of Carver and the producers escaped Fishburne's barrel. Or so they thought. In July 1994, before Die Hard with a Vengeance made its way to theaters, Fishburne hit the production company with a lawsuit for breach of contract. The lawsuit was settled 3 years later for $750,000, a couple bucks shy of what Fishburne would have gotten if the producers had agreed to his initial asking price. The action star clown car that is the Expendables franchise boasts names like Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jet Li, Terry Crews, Jason Statham, and many more. Of course, starting with 1988's Die Hard, Bruce Willis entered the pantheon of cinematic action heroes. Fittingly, Willis enjoys a cameo in 2010's The Expendables, along with a larger role in the 2012 sequel, The Expendables 2. But while most fans expected Willis to reprise the role of Church for 2014's The Expendables 3, it wasn't to be. In August 2013, Sylvester Stallone announced in all caps a major cast change on Twitter, sharing, "Willis out, Harrison Ford in. Great news. Been waiting years for this." By the following day, The Hollywood Reporter was claiming Willis's exit from the franchise was due to a huge paycheck demand. According to the source cited, Willis was offered $3 million for 4 days' work. He allegedly demanded a pay bump to $4 million, $1 million per day. The source added that Ford was cast within 72 hours of Willis's exit. To this day, plenty of fans name the late Sir Sean Connery as their favorite actor who played the sexy spy James Bond. However, the producers who negotiated with Connery may have felt differently. Connery's first turn as 007 came with 1962's Dr. No, and he played the charming secret agent in 4 more feature films before demanding a lot more compensation. By the time Connery starred in 1967's You Only Live Twice, he was being paid $750,000 plus a 25% share of merchandising. However, apparently, the actor was reportedly bored with playing the super spy and demanded $1 million to appear in the next Bond film, plus a percentage of the gross. Producers tried to use George Lazenby as a bargaining chip, but Connery didn't budge. And so the producers said goodbye to Connery, and Lazenby made his one and only appearance as James Bond in 1969's On Her Majesty's Secret Service. According to the documentary Becoming Bond, in spite of negative reviews for Lazenby's only Bond film, the actor said he was offered a contract for 6 more movies. He apparently turned them down on his agent's advice. Without Lazenby, United Artists lured Connery back to the world of espionage with a $1.25 million offer for 1971's Diamonds Are Forever. Since the early second season of the hit zombie apocalypse drama The Walking Dead, Maggie Rhee, played by Lauren Cohan, was a staple of the series. However, in Season 9, Maggie left with the relative safety of the Hilltop Colony to join up with a different band of survivors. At least that was the narrative reason for her absence. Behind the scenes, however, Cohan's contract renegotiations for Season 9 hadn't gone the way she'd hoped. Cohan refused to settle for less, and she was written out of the show.
All this time running from walkers. You forget what people do.
Cohan went on to star in the ABC action dramedy Whiskey Cavalier. According to Cohan, in spite of early reports that her only concern was money, she already had one foot out the door before contract negotiations broke down. In a 2018 discussion with Andy Cohen on Radio Andy, Cohan said she'd already been looking to explore, quote, comedy and happier fare. Talking to EW, Cohan mused, 8 years is a long time to spend in one character. Thankfully for Maggie fans, the character was written off but not killed. And in October 2019, news broke that Cohan would be returning to The Walking Dead as a series regular for the 11th and final season. In fact, Cohan showed up early in a recurring role toward the end of season 10. In 1980, ABC's Three's Company was one of the most successful sitcoms on television. The story about two women and one man living together as roommates in a Santa Monica apartment was a hit. Suzanne Somers, who played the voluptuous and ditzy Chrissy Snow, thought a pay raise was in order. However, her efforts ended with her getting booted off the show. The Hollywood Reporter revisited the story of Somers' firing in 2015, saying that Somers was getting paid $30,000 per episode, while co-star John Ritter was bringing home $150,000. When Somers asked for more, ABC offered her a bump of $5,000 per episode, but the actress stood her ground and demanded the same amount Ritter was receiving. After ABC refused Somers' demand, the actress missed the tapings for season 5's third and fourth episodes and was soon fired. Before this happened, Somers' manager and husband, Alan Hamill, was allegedly warned. Earlier that year, ABC had bowed to pressure and given raises to Penny Marshall and Cindy Williams, who at the time were the leads of Laverne and Shirley. Hamill said a friend with connections at ABC called and told him that ABC made an example of Somers to end talk of any more big paydays to leading women. When Marvel fans first met James Rhodey Rhodes, who would later become the Avenger known as War Machine, it was Terrence Howard playing the character. But in 2010's Iron Man 2, it was Don Cheadle in the role, and Cheadle would continue to play Rhodey for the rest of the character's appearances in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Howard wasn't happy with his ousting from the MCU, and for a while, he was pretty brazen about letting people know about it. In 2013, on Watch What Happens Live, Howard told Andy Cohen that when it came time to make Iron Man 2, Marvel only wanted to pay him 1/8 of what they owed him. He also added that when he reached out to co-star Robert Downey Jr. for help, he was ghosted. 2 years later, Howard told Rolling Stone that he'd volunteered to take a $1 million pay cut to get Downey cast as Tony Stark in 2008's Iron Man. However, Marvel disagreed with Howard's story. In 2017, Howard returned to Watch What Happens Live and said he and Downey were friends once more. He also claimed he was drunk when he'd appeared on the show in 2013 and blamed his inebriation for what he'd said. He stopped short, however, of saying his initial version of events was false. The first role that made critics take real notice of Robert Duvall was that of Tom Hagen. He was the shrewd but overcautious consigliere of the Corleone crime family in 1972's The Godfather. Duvall earned his first Academy Award nomination for his work in the film, and he reprised the role in 1974's The Godfather Part 2. But while Hagen survives the events of the first sequel, he's nowhere to be found in 1990's The Godfather Part 3. Instead, we learn Hagen has passed away in the years between the two stories. Speaking to Charlie Rose in 2004, Duvall said he left Tom Hagen behind not only because he wasn't offered enough money, but because someone else got way too much. Duvall told Rose, "I said I would work easily if they paid Al Pacino twice what they paid me. That's fine, but not 3 or 4 times, which is what they did." In 2010, Duvall told Reuters he had no regrets about not appearing in the film, since, as many critics and fans have agreed, it wasn't as good as the first two. When NBC's political drama The West Wing premiered in 1999, it was looking like Rob Lowe's Sam Seaborn would be a main character. But over the course of 3 seasons, Seaborn's role on the show diminished. Finally, a season 4 storyline was written to facilitate his departure, though he returned in a recurring role in the show's final season. According to CBR, Rob Lowe's departure from The West Wing wasn't just because he had trouble getting the show to pay him more money. Instead, it was because he was the only lead actor in the series who couldn't get more money. While many of Lowe's co-stars had their salaries doubled since the beginning of the series, his had reportedly remained the same. For example, while CNN put Lowe's compensation at $75,000 per episode, Martin Sheen was receiving $300,000 per episode. In an official statement Lowe released in July 2002, he said that he was grateful to have been a part of the series. However, it had been increasingly clear for a while that there was no longer a place for Sam Seaborn on The West Wing.